Okay, good morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from in the world today. I'm super excited to have you all here. I am joined today by my colleague Marissa, and we have put together a really impressive panel. I'm so excited to introduce you to all of them. Um, a few housekeeping things before we dive into the webinar. You'll notice off to the right that there's a little chat box type thing where you can enter your questions. Those questions will come to us. Feel free to send them throughout the webinar, and we'll do our best to get to all of them at the end. If we don't get to your question by the end, don't worry. We will either follow up with you individually with our panelists' input, or we will also be posting the slides online afterwards. To that point, we're also going to be dropping a link at the end of the presentation where you can download all of the slides, and feel free to keep this as a resource in the future. So I guess without any further ado, I'm going to have each of our guests and speakers and panelists speak a little bit about who they are and a bit about where they're joining us from today and their experience with UCAS clearing. So a quick start, I'm Jamie Conkey. I'm the head of engagement and partnerships at Concourse Global. I will turn it over to my colleague Marissa to introduce herself.
Thank you, Jamie. Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa Gambardella, and I am the engagement coordinator for Concourse Global. I just wanted to thank you all so much for joining, and a big, huge thank you to our wonderful panel for helping to make all of this happen.
Thank you. Alan?
Hello, everybody. My name is Alan Jones. I'm a professional development executive with UCAS, the admission system operating in the UK. I've worked here now for 19 years, so I've been through many clearings. Thank you for inviting me to speak today.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move over to our panelists. Kyra?
Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. My name is Kyra Kellawan, and I'm the Careers Advisor at Aloha College, which is a British IB and A-level school in Andalusia in the south of Spain. I've been on the school side for the last 5 years. This is my 5th year, but before that I was on the university side in the UK working largely for King's College London. So I've actually seen clearing from the other perspective as well, when it was all hands on deck to take clearing calls. And I'm a product myself of having gone through the clearing system. That was how I placed for my undergraduate degree at Southampton University. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Amanda?
Hi, my name is Amanda Edelhart. I'm currently the Director of College Counseling at the Harley School in Rochester, New York. I've actually just returned to the US after 17 years working in Asia and in the UK. I have used clearing for my students in a variety of ways, and I'm happy to be talking about something other than US applications. So I'm excited to be here.
Awesome, thank you. Actually, I'm not seeing Siobhan at the moment, but Anda, are you with us?
Hi, my name is Anda Studinova Vivas, and I'm the International Client Services Manager here at the University of Essex in England. I've helped out with clearing in our international students for about 5 years now, but I'm also graduate of the University of Essex as well.
Awesome, thank you. We also have Siobhan Elliott on here. I actually, unfortunately, don't see her at the moment, but she is with us today, so I'll have her join back in just a moment. I think for the moment, though, I'm going to turn this over to Alan, and give me one moment here. Okay, Alan, go ahead and let me know when you'd like me to switch the slides for you.
Bear with me 1 second. Just waiting for my screen to come up. Okay, lovely. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm here today to talk about clearing. Clearing is the process used by UK universities to fill any seats that are still available in their degree programs after all the students they've made conditional offers to, who've met their conditions and secured their places, have done that so that they know which vacancies they have. And then we use this process to try and help them match those vacancies with applicants who still want a place. Clearing is used by more than 65,000 students currently each year to secure placements in UK universities on courses. It's normally a release of UK level 3 results from examinations in mid-August, but it actually begins as early as the 5th of July. So anybody who has results, has their qualifications, and hasn't secured a place can start using clearing from the 5th of July, and it runs right through until mid-October each year. Next slide, please. Okay, just some general statistics. As you can see, UCAS deals with around 700,000 applications each year, the majority of them from UK-based 18-year-olds looking to progress straight from school into university. It's a great time to be applying for higher education programs in the UK. Last year, the universities made nearly 2 million offers to the applicants, and of the 700,000 who applied, nearly 534,000 were actually successful in getting accepted onto a course. The vast majority of those, 381,500, got into their firm choice, the university that they really wanted to go to. You can see the other stats on the slide there. And what's interesting, I think, is that the second largest number of people through clearing. Nearly 67,000 people last year secured a place through clearing at the end of the cycle. I'll break that down a little bit. Nearly 50,000 of those had been through the main scheme and either not got any offers or conditional on exam results and didn't quite get the results they needed to secure a place, so they moved on into clearing. But 17,500 actually didn't even apply until after the 30th of June at 6 o'clock and was still successful in securing a place. And you can see that gives an overall success rate, an acceptance rate of nearly 77%. That's a little bit lower, 59.9% for international students, but that's reasons. One is because they tend to apply for very demanding universities in the UK. Secondly, they tend to have applications in their own countries or elsewhere as well. And thirdly, sometimes it's a lack of understanding of how our processes work. So I'm really glad that you're joining us today to hear about clearing. Next slide, please. Okay, on this slide, I've just listed the top 10 countries from outside of the EU, outside of the UK, sorry, in order of the numbers of students securing places. And you can see the USA is 11th on that list there, but it gives you an idea of the build-up of some of the international applications. United Kingdom. It's a very cosmopolitan higher education sector. Next slide, please. Okay. Clearing plays a very important part in securing a place at UK higher education, and that's been of increasing importance. On this chart, you can see from 2014, the numbers rising and rising right through to 2017. There was a slight dip last year, but that's because there were slightly lower application numbers than in the previous year, and that was ostensibly driven by the fact that there were demographically fewer UK-based 18-year-olds in the population, a slight demographic change there. But it remains an incredibly important and robust way in which universities secure applicants. So a fantastic opportunity still to secure a place at a UK university. Okay, next slide, please. Hello, can we move on to the next slide?
Nope, it
Okay.
shows the UCAS works, yes.
Okay, so this is how the UCAS system works for most students. Most of them tend to apply early on in our application cycle, submitting an application with up to 5 choices of university and course on the application. Those are considered by the university's nominating from those 5 choices. Sometimes all 5 universities will make an offer. When they've heard back from all the universities, they reply to those offers, and at that point, students can select up to 2 choices to carry forwards to results time. A firm choice where they really want to go, and if they're holding a conditional offer, then an insurance choice in case they don't get the grades that they need. Then they work hard to try and secure their grades to do well in their exams. And when the universities receive their exam results, usually it means a place is confirmed, as you've seen, for over 75% of but manage to secure a place. If they're unsuccessful, or if they're applying after 6 o'clock UK time on the 30th of June, then okay, so how does clearing work? Well, basically, any applicant that looks in track, the system that shows their status in the application, and finds that they've not secured a place, um, will be given a clearing number. So they know they're eligible for clearing. So those students then search for programs using the UCAS search tool that still have openings, still have vacancies to fill. They then phone directly the universities that have vacancies that they're interested in, quoting their personal ID number and their clearing number, and they'll discuss things on the phone with them and decide whether they want to offer them a place or not. If the student is offered a place, then they can log into Track and click on a button which says Add Clearing Choice and add that university as their clearing choice so that the university receives their record and can accept them onto the place. Okay, next slide. Okay, in terms of the process, you do that research on the search tool. It's on the UCAS website, ucas.com. It's then up to the student to contact directly the course providers that have the vacancy. They're not limited to talking to just one university or college. They can call as many as they like, but when it comes to entering a choice in Track, they can only enter one choice. So my advice would be to call all the universities that they're interested in, have a pen and paper, and make details that they're made verbally, any universities that say they want to offer them a place, and then think about it for a little while and add on the choice that they really want to go to using Track. I think it is important that it's the applicant themselves, the student, who calls the university. They usually want to talk to the student, not a parent or a representative. That adding them on via the Track tool then opens up the record for the university or college to have a final look and accept the applicant onto their clearing place. It's worth remembering, I think, that you do really need to be able to quote both your 10-digit personal ID number that you get when you make the initial application and your 6-digit clearing number so that the universities know that you're actually eligible for clearing and can access your records for that chat. Okay, in the middle of August, when major exam results come out in the UK, there is a brief embargo period where no updates are made to the track record. So just bear that in mind as well. And on the date that A-level results themselves are published, which is the 15th of August this year, the Add Clearing Choice button won't appear in track until 3 o'clock in the afternoon UK time. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so who is eligible? Well, any students who didn't receive an offer from their original application or who received an offer but didn't get the grades they needed to secure a place. But also any students who have decided to make an application very late on after the 30th of June at 6 o'clock. All of those students will be eligible to take part in clearing scheme and try to secure a place, one of the vacancies that remains through the clearing scheme. Next slide, please. Few things to remember about clearing, I think. Um, the applicant has actually have to applied in the current cycle and paid the full application. It's not too late to apply. Applications made before the 30th of June will still have the initial 5 choices on them and be considered in the normal way. Applications made after the 30th of June are entered just for clearing, but they do need to be a full application with personal statement and reference and have paid the full fee in order to take part in the clearing scheme this year. Um, the applicants use the search tool on ucas.com to identify vacancies. That's the only place we publish the official vacancies now. As I said, they can contact as many universities as they wish, usually by telephone, and make notes of any that want to offer them a place, because they might set different deadlines to get them added onto track to secure that place. And as I said, they usually want to talk to the applicant directly. Um, they'll advise if they have a place and how long the applicant has, and then the applicant needs to meet that. If they don't meet the deadline set verbally by the university, the place may be given to somebody else because they are eager to fill the vacancies that they still have available. Next slide, please. Okay, I think that's all from me initially. I would just say the one thing that I didn't mention there was adjustment, which was another process that you saw in the slide which showed the ways in which students secured places. Adjustment is actually for students who get admitted to their firm choice university but do better than expected and might wish that they'd applied somewhere else. There is no vacancy list for adjustment. As you saw last year, only 880 people used adjustment. It's because it operates very late on, and the onus is very much on the student to contact universities directly to see if they can find one who are prepared to take them. But the benefit of adjustment, if anybody does want to try and use it, is that when you've secured your place, you think you've got better grades than anticipated, you can go into track and lock that place in for up to 5 days whilst you talk to other universities to try and find one that agrees that you've met every single condition of your offer, exceeded at least one, that has a vacancy and is prepared to take you away from the university you've secured the place with. If you don't find one, then your original place is still safely yours. Clearing, to be eligible for clearing, you have to be holding no place or no offers at all. And that's the major difference. But that time limit of 5 days makes adjustment a very difficult ask. Okay, and that's really all I wanted to say at this stage until we get into the questions and answers.
Alan, thank you so much. That's so helpful. And I want to remind all of our attendees that yes, we are recording this. So if you want to go back and rewatch some of Alan's comments and notes about how the clearing process works and who's eligible, that will all be available to you afterwards. And you'll be able to share it with some of your colleagues or anyone that you need or that might find it helpful. Because of we have the way we wanted to structure the questions is I think we actually first and foremost have a few questions that have come in specifically for you, Alan, and about the UCAS clearing process. So actually, Marissa is holding those. Would you mind
Okay.
reading those off, Marissa?
Sure, sounds good. Yes, we did have a few questions come in just for you, Alan, about UCAS and the clearing process. Let's see.
Okay.
The first will be, are students only able to apply to one university at a time through clearing?
Yes, they are. They can only add one clearing choice. And if they use track to add a choice, they would only be able to add another one if that original choice is unsuccessful, or if they're accepted by the university, they'd have to liaise with the university and get them to decline that offer, so that then they'd be able to add another choice and the add clearing choice button would reappear. So they can talk to as many as they want, but they have to make their decision of which one to add on before they go into track and add it on.
Perfect. That actually answers the next question also. The next question was about whether students have to wait for a decision before they can apply to another university. So that would be yes.
Absolutely.
Great. Next question is, is clearing only for undergraduate programs?
It is, I'm afraid. Yes, we do operate a postgraduate scheme which some universities use, but it is only for undergraduate programs. And usually ones starting in this year, the year of the application. It's unusual. Most universities don't like to deal with deferred entry places. It's worth talking to them, but don't be surprised if they advise you to apply for the next year instead.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alan. Next question. Can a student apply through clearing even if they haven't applied to any other programs in the UK? So if they haven't applied during like a regular application cycle, but they want to see what options they might have?
They have to submit and pay for a full application in order to be eligible for clearing. They don't have to have done it already. They can do that right up until the 20th or 21st of September, but they have to submit a full application in order to be given a clearing number. And that does have to contain all of the elements completed, the personal statement, the reference, etc.
Okay, great. Next question. Is there any extra cost to using clearing?
No extra cost for anything once you've paid the initial UCAS application fee, which is currently £24 sterling.
Okay, great. I think, let's see, there's, yeah, I think those are all the questions for you, Alan.
Okay, lovely.
All right, thanks, Alan. I'm gonna turn Alan off of presenter mode. So, but he's still around. So if any more questions come in, we might bring you back up, Alan. But thank you.
No problem.
We're gonna switch our attention over to the high school side and hear from our two high school counselors. We have Amanda and Kyra from New York and from Spain. Are you both here?
I'm here.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Marissa, do we have some questions for the high school side?
We certainly do.
Great.
Let's see. The first question is, and both of you feel free to give your answers to this. What successes have you seen come from clearing when working with your students? Whoever would like to go, yeah.
I can go first. So I think the thing that I've seen work really well for students with clearing is for two particular cases. When you're working with international students, often you are possibly dealing with them needing access to national fund scholarships. In particular, I work with students from Brunei, but I know this is the case for students from many other countries, where the results determine whether or not they have access to the scholarship funding. And so I've regularly had students who delayed their UCAS applications in order to see how their results come out, to see whether or not they're actually going to be able to afford to go to the UK in order to study. And so for those students, the opportunity to use clearing and to have it laid out for them well in advance how it would work is really beneficial. It means that they're not making applications to universities that they might not be able to access if the grades don't come through. It gives them, I would say, almost as much choice based on my experience later on in the process for international students. So I've seen that be really effective. I've also seen clearing be a really excellent choice for students who possibly are overpredicted and underperform, or underperform for other reasons, including health concerns, where the fact that clearing exists and the quality of courses that are available gives them peace of mind, that they know that they are going to end up at a strong university and a strong program, despite the fact that their grades aren't necessarily turning out the way they expected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is Kyra speaking. For my students, it's been a couple. I will admit it's not the majority at all. But I had students who changed their mind or had parental guidance to apply for a certain set of programs, and obviously they were less well prepared. In this case, it was pharmacy, a young woman whose family were pharmacists, and they wanted her to continue the family business. And she was really gunning for international relations and needed to do some family convincing. So, of course, she wasn't really successful with the choices she had for pharmacy. Her personal statement was kind of not great for that, but it was a real family issue, and there was a lot of pressure on her to go ahead with that application anyway. So once she realized that the offers she had on the table were not ones she would attend, and she'd had time to talk to the family about it, she actually ended up going back in and submitting new personal statements for international relations programs. So she found some success then, and it had given her the breathing space to kind of negotiate with the family in the meantime. And then other similar but different issues were students who had applied for very selective programs at very selective universities. So business management, for example, were rejected for the initial pool, but had focused on that university, really wanted to attend that university. And they went back into clearing for dual honors programs. So instead of a business management straight course, they did something like, they realized they spoke a language, in this case Spanish, and went back in for Spanish and business management and were successful through clearing. So it can help as well when the students' outlook has changed throughout the process of applying, and sometimes we've seen students mature or just adapt in terms of what they want, in which case having that little bit extra time helps them out a lot.
That's very interesting. It actually leads really well into the next question. Are there any difficulties that clearing causes for you or your students? So maybe students getting into programs through clearing that other students might have been rejected from either during the regular application cycle, or and how would you handle those?
I think it's Kyra again. I think it helps them consider other options as well. It helps them consider other programs that they wouldn't have looked at in the first round, but then they realize, actually, I do have the skills for, or it's very closely aligned. And I think what having that direct conversation with the university does is they're forced to think through what the content of the options through clearing are. They're really having a one-to-one conversation at that point. So they're able to understand that actually on the surface, the program might have had a different name, but it's very similar to one that they would have considered before. Yeah. Amanda, do you have any?
I do think it offers students an opportunity to also rethink what they might want to do. So if a student has applied, let's say, for a straight economics course, but as they've gone through the year, they've recognized that possibly straight economics is not the course for them. It's not as broad. You know, if they're coming from an IB program, they might want something that has a little bit more breadth. And as they approach the clearing process, they can see that, you know, combining different honors under a single degree, or looking at a course that approaches economics or an area of economics, let's say, from a different viewpoint, can be actually a better choice for them. I think when they are applying through clearing, and especially for IB students who are getting their results a little bit earlier in the process, and they have time to take the time to see what's available and see them listed in a way they haven't seen them listed before, can maybe open their minds a little bit. And I think that can be really effective for some students.
Sure, great. The next question is, how and when do you explain clearing to your students and their families?
So we do it as a part of the initial introduction to the UK application system, and then we do a refresher for students for whom it might be an option later on. I've always liked to include it as part of the application process, because it takes away from the kind of stigma of going through clearing when you talk about the positive elements of it.
That's exactly, actually, Amanda, I really want to know how the students and their families react. That's really fascinating to me to understand how they react to hearing about clearing. Like, what are the optics,
Well,
I guess?
I don't think it has quite the same stigma that it might have had in the UK previously, and I don't think it necessarily still has that stigma. But to explain that it just gives you another way of seeing what's available. For my students in Korea, their parents actually really liked that, because it's almost like they're not done shopping for the course that they're looking for.
Absolutely.
But I do think when you highlight the universities that engage in clearing at an early point, it just reiterates the fact to them that this isn't a negative option, that for some students this might be a really positive option.
Yeah, I think that's really nice that you introduce it early, and I'm trying to do now at this school, because I think you're right, there is a stigma, and I think sometimes that's from the schools themselves. In other schools I've worked in, they just really wanted all of the offers to be known as early as possible, and that was good for a board, or it was good for families to have certainty. It was kind of seen that you don't want to have to go into clearing kind of thing. And I always grappled with that, because actually it worked out really well for me, and I really enjoyed the course that I ended up placing on. But it is true that I think introducing the early and making students feel reassured that they have another route, it can be helpful in allaying some fears about the whole process. And also that, there's loads still. And I think the thing that even surprised me looking at this year's was just how places are available and at what type of university. It's not just kind of a way of placing at, it's not like a bargain-based kind of idea. It's definitely some of the most selected universities still have places on some of the courses you may not expect. And that's something that I think we have to reiterate.
Right. Great. Next question. Do you typically support your students through clearing over breaks or after they've graduated? And if you do, how much support is usually necessary to help students through the clearing process?
I do over the summer break. So I think we as counselors always work slightly odd years. I think it's important that they get the support they need over the break. For my students, I've always had every student write a UCAS style personal statement. That's just part of the process. And what that means is that they're always prepared. If they are deciding to make a late application, they have something written. Whether or not it's perfected is another story at that point. But we support them, from the point they get their scores. The difficulty for international students, of course, is making sure that they make the phone calls and getting people on the phone and the time differences, etc. So that's one part that we can't support them with because it's often happening in the middle of the night. But yeah, we do support them in terms of decision making and making sure the scores are submitted and making sure their personal statements are polished off for the course they end up applying for.
That's a really good point. And actually, I'm really glad also Alan mentioned, that it's really best that the student is the one to make that call and not having some, a parent or a third party putting that on. Do they ever ask you to do it for them?
There are occasions where students will ask that I reach out to talk about their qualifications, particularly, let's say, if their qualifications aren't exactly what the university is asking for, because sometimes it's easier for me to have that conversation because I have more technical knowledge than they do about the different qualifications. But when it comes down to talking about places, we don't do that. We support the student and we can give additional information or we can give context and support them in that way, but we can't really make that phone call for them.
Yeah, we're always available in the summer. We have to be, but I think that we have a duty to make sure that students and parents know that this call is theirs to make and that they need to be doing the research themselves. Because students really have a lot of power in having that conversation with the admissions teachers. It's helpful if they've been primed to understand that they're really the ones driving it forward at that point. So I think having them prepared as possible, and kind of, it's amazing how scary making a phone call is to this generation.
That's
they
true.
really like, and it's just kind of, we help them with going through practice calls, and I try and get them to call actually at different stages of the process for other things as well, whenever they have an admissions query, rather than just firing off an email, because it's all good practice in kind of learning how to sell themselves and talk about themselves in a way that they're not used to.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
That's
You're
really
right.
true.
We actually had another question come in because one of our panelists mentioned that they had gone through the clearing process themselves. Kyra, I believe that was you.
Yes, yeah, I did. Yeah,
and about-
18 years ago.
Well, maybe just, would you give a little bit more detail about like your thought process for going through clearing and what your experience was?
Yeah, well, I mean, I had pitched very high and very low, and I think that's partially the reason that I wanted to do this work, is because I didn't really have advice. I didn't have really good guidance when I was at school. So I had some choices that were way too high for me, and some that were universities that I could have easily gotten into. And then when I did my research, I decided I didn't want to go for them. So I ended up at a point where I had some unsuccessful offers, some successful, but then I declined the ones I was successful at to go back into the mix. And I had family in Southampton, and it seemed like a really good university for the subjects I wanted to do, which was English. So I ended up going back in I had applied originally for an English program with French, and I went back into the mixed humanities program with an English major. And actually that course was a kind of precursor of liberal art. So it was a really mixed course that I would never have found. I would never have understood that it existed. So it was a mix of English literature and of history and of film, and cultural studies and gender studies. So it was something I really enjoyed. But I had just started my looking for straight English programs or English and French. So yeah, it worked out really well, but it was terrifying. I remember being absolutely, white as a sheet making those calls, because you really had to kind of talk about yourself and be vocal about why you deserve that place. And in those days I was speaking directly to the admissions tutor. So
Wow.
it was brutal. It felt like it was a lot to ask of an 18-year-old who was really not sure about what was happening next. Really glad that it gave me some training.
Yeah.
in just kind of putting the bullet a little bit.
Right. Well, thank you both so much. I think those are all of the questions that we have directed towards the high school counseling side. Jamie, we have had a couple of questions come in for Alan. I don't know if you want to hop to the
Sure, let me pop Alan back in here really quickly.
Just a couple quick questions for Alan.
Alan, are you back with us? Maybe take him a moment. Yeah. And then after Alan answers these questions, we'll move to the university side. So again, if you've got more questions, feel free to pop them in that little box on the right side of the screen. Alan, hi.
Yes.
Hi.
Great.
Go ahead, Marissa.
So we've had a couple questions come in. The first is, proportionally, are there fewer clearing spaces available from Russell Group universities?
Probably yes, just because they are so very popular and high demand. However, currently, even Russell Group, the most demanding universities in terms of entry requirements, etc., are recruiting through clearing now. There's no standoffishness about that any longer. Changes within the sector here mean that even the most demanding of universities, with possibly the exception of Oxford and Cambridge, who tend not to use clearing very much, but even the most popular of other universities. However, like I said, there will be less courses available because they will have filled more by the surfeit of applications that they have in the first instance. I think it's also worth remembering that when English exam results come out in mid-August, it does get very, very busy then in clearing, and there are 5 or 6 days, 7 days when the phone lines are going to be jammed because all of the UK students who are unsuccessful have suddenly found that out, and they're all going into this process and trying to chase the most popular places as well. So there are about 5 days when it's a bit like Black Friday extended.
Right. And I'm sure when we start asking those universities some questions, we'll be hearing about that, I'm sure.
Yes, indeed. I'm sure.
Then, so the next question is, are students able to submit new personal statements or new references for clearing, or are they required to submit those new documents?
They're not able to in the UCAS application. However, they're going to be talking directly with universities. So if they want any additional information, they will advise the student and make it an opportunity for them to do it very quickly, maybe by email or something. But it's not normally required for most of the vacancies.
Okay. I think those are the only questions that we have for you, Alan. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks for popping
no
back
problem.
in, Alan. I'm going to switch you out and bring in Anda, and we will move to the university side of this panel.
I know since we missed Siobhan earlier in the call. Siobhan, did you want to do a quick intro?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I don't know what happened there earlier. But yeah, my name is Siobhan Elliott, and I work at the Arts University Bournemouth. I work predominantly in the international office, dealing with our students that apply from the US. But I am quite involved in the UCAS, in the clearing process, specifically for international students. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Great.
And Anda, you're with us too?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Perfect. Great. So let's kick it off. The first question is how quickly do programs fill up through clearing?
So this is Siobhan again. Alan just kind of explained about that and how the process works. So obviously clearing opens quite early in July, but the majority of applications that we see through clearing come in mid-August when the British students receive their A-level results. And that's when courses fill up really quickly. So our advice for international students who already have their results would be for them to really start going through the clearing process as early as they can. If they have their results and they're ready to go, then there's no reason to not start going through that process to make sure that they do secure a place on the course that they're most interested in. So yeah, it depends on each program as well, and I'm sure every university would say something slightly different, but the more popular programs will fill more quickly, and our advice would be to try and do it as early on in the process as possible.
Yeah, I would second what Siobhan just said, and I think it really depends on the course. Some courses will never go into clearing because they're already full in the year. Some courses will go into clearing but fill up really quickly. So obviously clearing is a wonderful chance, but if you get that offer in clearing, you really have to accept it and secure it quite swiftly, because as Alan mentioned before, if you leave it past the deadline that each university gives you to accept that offer, they might offer it to somebody else. So I think, yeah, it all depends a bit on the course and on the university and on the deadline the university gives you. If I can, I wanted to say a couple of things of what Alan mentioned from a university perspective about personal statements and whether a new one is needed in clearing.
Sure, feel free.
Yes, because I think from our perspective, for example, we don't usually require a new personal statement unless, as some of the counselors mentioned, sometimes students have a complete change of heart. So in their main cycle applications, it could be that they've applied mainly to business courses, but suddenly they've realized that actually they're able, their qualifications allow them to, and they'd rather do law. Or something along those lines. If it's a completely change of sort of where they want to go and what they want to study, in those cases, we might ask them to email in a personal statement, a new one, just to see, whether they're prepared to do that new subject area, not because of grades, but to see the personal statement. And I also wanted to quickly mention that obviously now that there's so many very international universities in UK as Essex, that we know that we're dealing in clearing with people from all around the world. So I think now there are so many ways that you can get in touch with universities in clearing, not just phone lines. The phone lines are obviously always there, and if people want to give us a call, we always are happy to chat through their options. But we know that sometimes it's in the middle of the night and it's difficult. So we, as many other universities, we have an online clearing inquiry form. So that's a web form where people can write in their current grades, what they got, what they want to study, and any reasoning why. And we will communicate via email. We do clearing live chat as well, where you can chat live to our tutors as well and get advice that way. So there's many more options out there, not just the phone lines.
Great. The next question is it easier to be accepted to a program when applying through clearing because the university is trying to fill seats, or the admission requirements ever lowered? It's a bit of a tricky one.
I'm not sure. I can go first. So for Essex, not really, because our confirmation levels, so the levels where we confirm students at when they receive their results, will be the same as clearing levels. So it wouldn't really make that much of a difference for us, for example.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I wouldn't say that it's an easier way of getting in. Something I should probably also mention in our case specifically, because we're a creative university, is that students going through clearing would still need to submit a portfolio of work or an audition, which can obviously be sent over digitally. And so we're still looking for strong academic grades and also the portfolio element. So we wouldn't ever advise for students to wait for clearing, thinking that it would be an easier way to get in, because, you know, as Anna mentioned, when confirmation happens and the entry requirements may be lowered slightly, but that isn't necessarily going to happen. So it's, you know, better for students if they can apply previously if they're set on a particular course. And they would still need to submit the portfolio as part of the clearing process. And that's specifically for creative courses, which is what we offer at AUB.
Okay, great. Thank you both. The next question is, can a student be admitted through clearing and defer to a later start term? So whether it be maybe they don't get a visa in time or something, is that a possibility?
I think it really depends university to university. So when I answer this, I'm answering about the University of Essex and not necessarily the whole sector. So before clearing, each student needs to make sure that university that they're applying to via clearing would allow that. So for Essex, it might be possible. So obviously during clearing, as I mentioned before, we wouldn't so for example, if somebody went through clearing in August 2019, we wouldn't accept them straight into 20 entry. If they are accepted for 19 entry, and then for whatever reason they can't make it in time, we will look at each deferral request on case-by-case basis, because obviously we need to make sure that Tier 4 requirements will still be applicable, that any other requirements will still be valid a year on, because when we defer somebody, they go from an unconditional firm offer to an unconditional firm offer for the next year. So we just want to make sure that firm element of that offer is still there year to year. So we will look at each deferral request individually on case-by-case basis. So it is possible, but it's not guaranteed.
Yeah, and I would agree with Andrew. We're the same. So it is done case by case. We just look at each request as it comes in, look at the conditions of the offer, at what stage the student is at, and then we would consider it based on each student's situation. So it is possible. Some students it doesn't work for, and others it is possible.
Great. Yes, and we totally understand that you're speaking generally about the universities where you're working, so that's totally fine.
So it's always worth the students, if they've got questions like that when they're going through the clearing process, to ask whoever it is that they speak to at each individual university, just to gather as much information about that specific university and their processes.
Right. The next question is whether both of your universities offer on-campus housing. Is it difficult for students who are admitted through clearing to find on-campus housing because it's so much closer to the term?
Again, for Essex, because I think we start our academic year a bit later than other universities. So we start our academic year in first week of October. So we have for undergraduate students, we have our guaranteed accommodation deadline that will be for this summer around 19th of August. So as long as they get their offer from us firmed up before that and can make their accommodation application before that sort of second, third week of August, then they're guaranteed on-campus accommodation. After that, obviously, it's only if we have accommodation available.
Mm-hmm. Ours is slightly different to that in that we don't have guaranteed accommodation for everybody, but we do prioritise our international students. And what we do is set aside a certain amount of accommodation on campus for clearing applicants. And we would always ensure that the international applicants that are coming through clearing are prioritised. So we would try our very best to offer them on-campus accommodation. If that isn't possible for whatever reason, then our office, the international office, will always support the students to find something, whether that be with a private provider or going into sort of a house share setup. But we would certainly do our very best to offer halls of residence the on-campus accommodation.
Great. Thank you both. And we're mindful of the time, so we have two more questions. One that just came in about whether the admissions tutors prefer one-on-one conversations just with the student when students are calling for clearing.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, for us, it doesn't really matter. I think where the one-on-one conversations are helpful is if the student has, for example, an unusual grade profile, or if they're completely switching what they want to study. So then sometimes the admissions tutor would want to chat with them. But even if they apply, as I said, through the web form, if the tutor feels that, they need that chat, they would call them up. They would send them an email and set up a phone call during clearing. So even if the student doesn't make the initial call, but the tutor is not ready to accept them without a conversation, we will try to get in touch with the student.
Yeah, we have a very similar view in that we receive inquiries for clearing or applications, not just by telephone, but also through our live chat, through email. And I would say the majority of the time we would try and get in touch with the student to have that conversation. So the admissions tutors would reach out to the students. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then one final question. Do you have any tips for students or counselors going through clearing?
I think the main thing to kind of emphasize is just for the students to be ready, for them to know what it is that they're looking for, to have everything available that the universities may ask for, so academic grades, obviously, to be able to talk about why they're interested in applying for that course. Again, if it's a creative course,
I think
Did we lose her?
She might have cut out.
Okay.
Can you hear us, Siobhan?
Or Anda, do you have any tips?
I think just to emphasize what Siobhan said, just be as ready as possible and just keep calm. It is a stressful time, but as people previously mentioned, thousands and thousands of people go through that process, so the applicants are by no means alone. The universities have worked in international clearing for decades now, so on our side we know what the students are going through. So just keep calm, have everything prepared. So especially for the students that may not have applied in the main cycle, that are going sort of into clearing cold, have the personal statements ready, references from the schools, everything ready, so we can make a quick decision. And just keep calm. And I think one thing I want to emphasize is, once the students are at the university, nobody will ever ask, nobody would care how they got there, whether it was through clearing, through main cycle. It makes no difference whatsoever when students are in. So students just should be prepared and remain calm and just try and get through the process.
Great. That's really, really good advice, I think. So I'm going to move to our final slide here, which is some resources for all of our audience members. Anda and Siobhan, thank you very much for being with us and for answering so many questions. These resources here that you see are all free and easily available. I've also listed all of the contact information for everyone. One other thing I'm going to do is you'll notice off to the right, there's something called a C4 wiki. For those of you who may have joined us for a previous webinar, we talked about our C4, which is the Common College Counseling Curriculum. And that's basically a wiki. I mean, so when you click on it, it will take you to a website, and we have information on specifically clearing. But you'll also notice that there are several different pages focused on different countries. I have to do a big shout out for both Amanda and Kyra, who actually helped compile a lot of this information. Kyra in particular, who worked heavily on adding a huge list of summer programs. And there's also a direct link in the slides as well that you'll be able to download. But the URL basically is concourse.global/C4. So that's from us here at Concourse Global. We also have a link directly to Concourse if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what it is we do and how we assist international counselors who are working with students who are headed all over the world. All of our services for counselors are also free. The final little thing that I'm going to put up, don't worry, I'm going to take this link away, but you will be able to access it in just a bit and through the webinar slides, is I'll allow you to download the slides. So you'll see that now off to the right. So feel free to download the slides. Don't worry if the event ends or if someone had to leave early. We will be posting the slides, and we'll also post a recording of the webinar online. If you're not following us on Facebook, do, because we'll also put links in there. So our Facebook link is just facebook.com/Concourse Global, and then we also are on Instagram. So thank you all so much again. Big thank you to Alan, to Kyra, Siobhan, Amanda, and Anda. It was so wonderful having you here. I think this was really helpful. And I hope that our audience felt like it was useful, and that if you do have any further questions, or if we didn't get to them, we will be following up with you separately. So with that, it's now 8 o'clock here in New York, and I'm going to go ahead and end this webinar. But thank you again, and we will see you next time.